The day I received my provisional acceptance into a graduate program, my mom came home carrying 2 shopping bags with the Apple logo on them. She said with a smile, "Since you're both heading to graduate school, I bought each of you a new laptop. It's only fair." My sister eagerly tore open her bag. Inside was the latest MacBook, sleek, lightweight, and beautiful. Then, Mom handed me mine. It was an older model from several years ago, with basic specs and not even a single accessory included. I looked down at the 2 laptops, the difference between them impossible to ignore. Before I could say anything, Mom gently ruffled my hair. "Sonny, your field doesn't require that much computing power. This one's durable, and it was a great deal. I went to several stores before I found the right one for you, so don't overthink it." She smiled as she spoke, almost hoping I would praise her for all the effort she had made. She did love me. To prove she did not play favorites, she spent a sweltering summer afternoon driving from store to store to find my laptop. However, she had forgotten one thing. My sister and I were in the exact same graduate program. That was when I realized something I should have understood long ago. The love she gave me was always just a little less. From that day on, I stopped hoping it would ever be enough. Without saying a word, I carried the old, heavy laptop back to my room. Behind me, I heard my mother, Judith Hawkins, laugh with satisfaction. "I told you Sonny was the sensible one. She's never fought with the family over anything, not since she was little." In the weeks leading up to graduate school interviews, my older sister, Fiona Charlton, spent every day hanging out with college friends and shopping for new clothes. Meanwhile, I locked myself in my room and pulled 3 all-nighters in a row. Professor Wilson from our department had one recommendation slot that guaranteed admission into one of the university's premier research labs. Anyone who earned that spot would also receive early access to the school's most prestigious research projects. I spent 3 full days researching and writing a detailed proposal. After a rigorous review, it was finally approved. Not long afterward, Professor Wilson's lab sent me a confirmation email. Because this project requires a significant time commitment, including some weekends and holidays, a parent or legal guardian must sign the attached consent form acknowledging these arrangements. After dinner, I handed the printed consent form to Mom. She skimmed through it, her brows furrowing slightly. "So, you'd be joining the advanced research lab? And you have to work weekends and holidays too? That sounds exhausting. You're about to start graduate school. There's no reason to push yourself this hard." "I don't mind working hard. And this opportunity is incredibly rare. It'll help a lot when I apply for a PhD and when I start looking for a job." I answered simply. Mom nodded, folded the form, and slipped it into her pocket. "All right. I'll read it carefully tonight and sign it for you tomorrow." I believed her. 3 days later, the thing I received was not my signed consent form. Instead, I saw Fiona's name on the list of students accepted into Professor Wilson's research lab on the department's website. I stared at the screen for 3 long seconds before getting up and pushing open the door to Mom's bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, helping Fiona pick out a dress for graduate school orientation. The 2 of them were chatting and laughing together. Why did Professor Wilson's lab position become Fiona's? I looked straight into Judith's eyes. My voice was so calm that even I was surprised. Mom froze, her hand still holding the dress. Fiona immediately stood up, looking awkward as she avoided my gaze. "Sonny, I didn't know. Mom told me Professor Wilson offered me the position himself." "Go try on this dress first," Judith interrupted, patting Fiona on the back. "Check yourself in the mirror in the living room." Fiona hesitated for a moment before leaving. As soon as the door closed, Mom let out a long sigh. She walked over to me, her face filled with what looked like both love and helplessness. "Sonny, don't blame me for making the decision without asking you." She reached for my hand. "I contacted Professor Wilson myself. I had your research proposal replaced with Fiona's. After looking through Fiona's undergraduate record, he reluctantly agreed to accept her into the graduate program." I slowly pulled my hand away and stared at her. That was my spot. I stayed awake for 3 straight nights researching and writing that proposal just to pass the first round. "What gave you the right to hand it to her?" "I know you're upset," Mom said quickly, trying to calm me down. Her voice softened into the patient tone adults always used when they thought they knew better. "But Sonny, you've always been the smart one. You've always been exceptional. Even if you don't get into this lab, you'll still have plenty of chances. Whether it's for another graduate program, a PhD, or overseas studies, you'll earn scholarships. You'll have a bright future, no matter what. However, Fiona is different." Mom let out a sigh, her brows knitted tightly together. Fiona's grades were average all through college. If she were to apply to graduate school on her own, she would have a hard time getting into a good program. If she doesn't get into this lab, she'll probably struggle to find even a decent job after graduation. She's never had much confidence in herself. If she takes another hit, she'll completely fall apart. So, the opportunity that I work myself to the bone for should just be handed over to her? I shot back calmly. What do you mean, handed over? I'm protecting her. Mom raised her voice, sounding as though it was the most obvious thing in the world. You're her younger sister. What's wrong with helping Fiona? Your research proposal was so well written. Once it was submitted under Fiona's name, of course, Professor Wilson thought more highly of her. With this lab experience on her resume, it'll be much easier for her to find a job or apply to graduate school later. It's different for you. With your ability, even if you lose this opportunity, you'll earn an even better one someday. Fiona can't, and we're family. Why do you have to keep score over everything? I looked at her, and suddenly found the whole situation so absurd that it was almost funny. So, because I'm more capable, I deserve to lose what's mine? And because she's weaker, she gets to take everything I fought so hard for without feeling guilty. How can you say something so cruel? Mom frowned, looking completely disappointed that I was being so petty. Enough. It's already settled. Professor Wilson has submitted the finalist. There's no changing it now. She sighed again before adding, I know you're hurting. Tonight, I'll make your favorite roast beef to make it up to you, okay? Without waiting for an answer, she waved me off impatiently and headed into the kitchen. At dinner, she smiled as she placed a large slice of roast beef onto my plate. Go on, try it. I made this especially for you. It was roasted for hours, and it's delicious. I picked up my knife and fork, cut off a piece, and took a bite. The first thing I tasted was the rich flavor of rosemary, Fiona's favorite herb. Well, is it good? Mom asked expectantly. It is. I swallowed the bite and cut off another piece. I simply sat there in silence. I did not flip the table, and I did not ask why she had cooked it the way Fiona liked instead of the way I did. Bite by bite, I finished the entire plate of roast beef that had been made entirely to Fiona's taste. It did not make me sick, and I did not burst into tears or run out of the house. There was only a dull ache spreading through my chest. When I finished the last bite, I set down my knife and fork, quietly rose from the table, and headed back to my room. There was no argument and no dramatic outburst. I simply grabbed a change of clothes before disappearing into the bathroom. Half an hour later, I was drying my hair as I pushed open my bedroom door. My footsteps stopped cold. Fiona was sitting at my desk with her back to me. She had a flash drive in one hand and was frantically working on my computer. What are you doing? I asked, my voice icy. Fiona jumped so hard that her whole body shook. She spun around, her face turning ghostly pale. Her first instinct was to yank out the flash drive. However, I was already beside her. I grabbed her wrist before she could. A progress bar was moving across the screen. Sonny? I was just looking. Fiona stammered, unable to meet my eyes. Do you even understand what you're looking at? I demanded. You got Professor Wilson's lab position, but you can't even understand the research materials he sent you, can you? So, while I was taking a shower, you sneaked in here to steal the core notes I spent 3 sleepless nights putting together? Embarrassment instantly turned into anger, and Fiona struggled to pull free. What do you mean, steal? Mom said this project belongs to me now. If you won't let me see it, how am I supposed to join the graduate research team when school starts? Are you trying to ruin me? Those are my notes. Get out. I shoved her away and reached for my computer. Her eyes went red with panic as she lunged for the keyboard. Give it to me. You just want to watch me embarrass myself, don't you? She stumbled. Her hand flailed wildly through the air. The glass of water on my desk toppled over, spilling across my computer keyboard. A sharp electrical crackle echoed through the room. The screen flickered twice before going completely black, leaving me frozen where I stood. For one terrifying moment, my mind went blank. What's going on? Why are you two making so much noise this late at night? Hearing the commotion, Mom rushed into the room. The moment Fiona saw her, her eyes instantly filled with tears. She burst into sobs and immediately accused me. Mom, I just wanted to learn from Sonny's way of thinking. I was scared I wouldn't be able to keep up once school starts, and I didn't want to disappoint you. But instead of helping me, Sonny kept treating me like the enemy. She even pushed me. I accidentally knocked over the water, and her computer got ruined. Mom looked at the computer with its dead black screen, then she looked at Fiona, whose face was streaked with tears. Her expression immediately darkened. She did not scold Fiona for sneaking into my room and stealing my work, and she did not ask about the months of effort that had just been destroyed. Instead, she frowned and turned to me with obvious irritation. Sonny, Fiona is about to start graduate school under Professor Wilson. What's wrong with her looking at your notes? That research proposal belongs to Fiona now. Why won't you hand it over? She's your sister, not your enemy. We're family. Family is supposed to help each other, not guard against each other. I never imagined you'd be so cold-hearted. She destroyed all my research. My whole body shook with anger. It's just an old laptop. Do you really have to make such a big deal out of it? Mom raised her voice, drowning mine out. So, what if the files are gone? They're still in your head, aren't they? You're so smart. Just write them all over again. What did you just say? My voice trembled. Mom replied without the slightest guilt. I said you're going to rewrite that entire research proposal from memory tonight. Think of it as a back-to-school gift for your sister. If she can't keep up during her first week, if she gets discouraged or falls into depression because she struggles with the research team, I'll cut off your living expenses. I looked at the two of them. Fiona stood behind Mom, unable to hide the smug satisfaction in her eyes. Mom stood there as though she were completely justified, demanding that I hand over everything I had fought so hard to earn. It was as if my dreams, my career, and my future were nothing more than gifts she could give away whenever she pleased. An icy chill crept up my spine. Then, all at once, my heartbeat steadied. There was no anger, no heartbreak. Okay. My voice was calm. Mom blinked, clearly surprised that I had agreed so easily. The tension in her face eased. That's more like it. I knew you'd be the reasonable one. Stop arguing with your sister all the time. All right, get started. Just don't stay up too late. The door closed behind them. I turned around. Looking at my completely ruined computer, I did not shed a single tear. Instead, I picked up my phone. I opened an email that had been sitting quietly in my inbox for weeks. It was an official admission letter from one of the top universities on the other side of the world. Due to my grades and research experience, they had not only admitted me but also awarded me a full scholarship that covered all of my tuition and living expenses. Until now, I had still been hesitating. I was not sure whether the savings I had worked so hard to build over the years would be enough for me to start a new life alone in another country. However, at that moment, as I looked at the ruined laptop, I did not hesitate for even a second. I tapped Accept Offer. Then, I logged into my university's student portal. I submitted my request to withdraw from the graduate program at my current university. Next, I pulled a small suitcase from the bottom drawer of my closet. Quietly, I began packing the few things that truly belonged to me. For the next 2 days, I deliberately stayed out of Mom's and Fiona's way. Finally, the day before orientation day at my graduate school arrived. I went back to my room to retrieve the one thing that mattered most, the bank card hidden beneath the false bottom of my desk drawer. It held every scholarship I had earned through years of studying, along with the money I had saved working at a fast food restaurant during my summer and winter breaks. It was my tuition, my living expenses, my only way out. However, when I pulled open the drawer, it was empty. Panic surged through me as I yanked every drawer open and searched every corner of the room. Nothing. The bank card was gone. I rushed into the living room, where Mom was helping Fiona pack. 2 expensive suitcases sat on the floor, crammed with brand new clothes and everything Fiona would need for school. In Mom's hands was the latest professional camera. Where's my bank card?
I ser her.
Without even looking up, Mom continued packing. Oh, that card? I took your ID to the bank yesterday and transferred all the money out of the account. Transferred it out? That was the education fund Dad left for me. It was supposed to pay for my future. Enough. Stop bringing up your father. Mom cut me off impatiently. Fiona is about to join Professor Wilson's lab. The students there either come from wealthy families or have every advantage in life. She can't show up wearing old clothes and carrying cheap things while everyone else has the best. These are necessary expenses. We're a little short on money right now, so I just borrowed yours for the time being. I'll pay you back when we have the money. What gave you the right to touch my education fund? I finally lost control, my voice shaking with rage. Because I'm your mother. Mom exploded too. She shot to her feet and pointed a finger at me. I raised you all these years. Don't I have the right to decide how a little of your money is used? Besides, your grades are excellent. Once school starts, you can apply for scholarships, financial aid, or even student loans. You'll figure something out. However, Fiona is different. She's never been as strong as you. She can't handle that kind of hardship. She had taken my place. She had destroyed everything I had worked for. Now, she was cutting off the very last lifeline I had left. I stopped arguing. My eyes locked on Mom's open handbag on the couch. My ID and the few $100s I had left were inside. I rushed over and grabbed the bag, digging through it. Have you lost your mind? Mom screamed and lunged at me, clamping both hands around my arm. "Give me my ID. Give me my money back," I shouted. "You're really going to fight me over this little bit of money? I can't believe you've become like this." Mom glared at me. The money had never been what she could not accept. What she could not accept was that, for the first time in my life, I had refused to obey her. Blazing with anger, she shoved me with all her strength. "Get out of my way." I was completely unprepared. I lost my balance and was thrown backward. A sickening crack echoed through the living room as my lower back slammed into a sharp corner of the coffee table, sending a jolt of pain shooting through my spine. Within seconds, cold sweat soaked through the back of my shirt. I gasped with my mouth wide open, struggling to breathe. The pain was so intense that my body reacted on its own. My stomach churned violently, and I began dry heaving uncontrollably. Just then, a car horn sounded outside. Fiona called from downstairs in her sweet, sugary voice.
"Mom."
"Hurry up. We're going to be late. We can't be late for the meeting with Professor Wilson." Mom stood there, looking down at me as I lay on the floor, trembling in agony. For a split second, panic flashed across her face. Only for a second, however. Then, it disappeared beneath cold indifference and annoyance. She straightened the wrinkles in her clothes that I had pulled out of place. "It's just an ID. Do you really think having it is going to change anything?" She let out a mocking laugh, pulled my ID from her bag, and casually tossed it onto the floor. "Stop acting so fragile. You just bumped into something. How serious could it possibly be? Put some ice on it or rub on a little pain cream. You'll be fine. I'm taking Fiona to school to finish her enrollment. When I get back tonight, we're going to have a serious talk about your attitude." Without another glance at me, she turned around and walked out the front door. The door slammed shut. I lay on the floor for more than 10 minutes before I could finally move again. Clenching my teeth until my jaw ached, I forced myself to endure the blinding pain that nearly made me pass out. Using the edge of the coffee table for support, I slowly pulled myself to my feet. I bent over and picked up my ID from the floor, then I walked to the dining table. I placed my old laptop on top of it. Beneath the laptop was an itemized ledger I had prepared long ago. Every dollar Mom had spent on my tuition, living expenses, and every other cost since high school had been carefully recorded, down to the last cent. On the final page were 2 lines. "I will repay every cent, with interest. From this day forward, we owe each other nothing." I pulled my packed suitcase behind me without looking back at the house even once. Limping with every step, I walked out the front door and headed for the bus station, in the exact opposite direction from where Fiona was beginning her new life. The airport medical clinic smelled heavily of isopropyl alcohol and stale
"Coffee."
The doctor on duty, an elderly man with thick bifocals, gently pressed against the lower left side of my back. A sharp, searing pain shot up my spine, forcing a choked gasp from my throat. "Contusion and muscle tears," the doctor said, shaking his head as he wrote out a prescription for strong painkillers and a lumbar brace. "You took a heavy
blow.
You shouldn't be sitting on a long-haul flight like this. You need bed rest." "I have a flight in 2 hours," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have
To be on it."
He looked at me over his glasses, taking in my solitary suitcase, my pale face, and the quiet, desperate certainty in my eyes. He didn't ask questions.
He
Simply handed me the prescription, a flexible support belt, and 2 extra-strength anti-inflammatory pills with a paper cup of water. "Take these before you board," he said quietly. "And don't lift anything heavy." By the time I buckled my seatbelt in the economy cabin, the pain had dulled to a thrumming, rhythmic ache. As the plane banked over the city, the grid of streetlights shrank into tiny threads of gold before dissolving into darkness. I leaned my head against the oval window. For 22 years, my life had been defined by a constant, exhausting struggle to prove I was worthy of love. Every straight-A report card, every scholarship, every sacrifice was an offering laid at my mother's feet, hoping that one day she would look at me with the same pride and warmth she gave Fiona without a second thought. Sitting on that plane, listening to the steady hum of the engines, the burden finally slipped away. She didn't love me less because I was deficient. She loved me less because she chose to, and I no longer had to stay to watch her choose. Back in the quiet residential neighborhood, the sun was setting when Judith Hawkins drove her second-hand sedan into the driveway. Fiona scrambled out of the passenger seat, carrying 3 shopping bags filled with high-end cosmetics and new clothes for her graduate school orientation. "Mom, can you carry my garment bag?" Fiona called out, her voice cheerful.
"I
"Don't want to crease my dress." "Of course, sweetie. Judith said, smiling as she gathered the dry-cleaned outfit. When they stepped into the front hall, the house was dead silent. The kitchen
Was dark.
no smell of dinner hung in the air. Judith's brows knitted together. Sonny, she called out, her tone dropping into that familiar edge of impatience. Sonny, drop down here and help your sister. Take her bags upstairs. Silence met her voice. Judith scoffed, walking into the living room, still pouting over that little
Bump.
She's getting more dramatic by the day. She walked into the dining room to drop her purse on the table, but stopped dead in her tracks. Sitting right in the middle of the dark wood table was the old, silver-painted laptop with its shattered screen and cracked casing. Beside it lay a neatly stapled stack of papers. Fiona walked in behind her, clutching a box of expensive shoes. What is that? Judith didn't answer. She stepped forward, her heart giving an unexpected, uncomfortable thud. She picked up the top paper. It was an itemized ledger, written in precise, immaculate handwriting. High school tuition and books, $3,200. Food and board, ages 16 to 18, $8,400. Medical expenses, 2018 to 2022 150 asterisk. Asterisk summer allowance deductions, minus 2,400. Education fund stolen, August 2026 minus $14,500. At the bottom, in dark black ink, was a single, bold line. Net balance owed, $0. I will repay the remaining balance for my upbringing with interest over time. From this day forward, we owe each other nothing. Judith's fingers tightened on the paper, crumpling the edge. Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. What is the meaning of this childish nonsense? She spat, slamming the paper back onto the table. She thinks she can calculate what she owes me? I gave her life. I raised her. Mom, Fiona said softly, pointing toward the hallway.
Her room door is
open. Judith marched down the hallway and threw open the door to Sonny's room. The room was stripped bare. The desk was empty, save for a few stray paperclips. The closet door hung open, revealing empty hangers. The bed was neatly made, stripped of its sheets. It didn't look like a room someone was coming back to. It looked like a hotel room after checkout. She took her suitcase, Fiona whispered, a sudden flicker of unease crossing her face. Mom, where did she go? School doesn't start until next week. Where else could she go? Judith sneered, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. She pulled out her phone and dialed Sonny's number. The number you've dialed is no longer in service. Judith stared at the screen in disbelief. She dialed again. The same automated voice repeated the message. She changed her number. Judith muttered, her hands trembling slightly with anger. She's throwing a tantrum. She thinks if she runs away for a few days, I'll beg her to come back. Let her stay at a friend's place. Let her see how hard the real world is without my backing. When her money runs out, she'll come crawling home. She turned on her heel and walked back to the kitchen, trying to ignore the strange, heavy quiet settling over the house. Come on, Fiona, Judith said, forcing a smile. Let's unpack your new clothes. Tomorrow is your big day at Professor Wilson's lab. The morning air in Boston was crisp and sharp. Standing before the massive stone pillars of the university, I pulled my jacket tighter around myself. My back still throbbed with every step, but the cold air felt clean in my lungs. Professor Vance's office was located on the 4th floor of the Advanced Research Building. Unlike the chaotic, crowded office of Professor Wilson back home, this room was quiet, lined from floor to ceiling with academic journals and specialized technical texts. An elderly woman with short gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes looked up from her computer as I knocked on the open door. Sonny Hawkins? Professor Vance asked, pushing her reading glasses up her nose. Yes, Professor, I said, stepping inside. She stood up and walked over, eyeing the stiff way I held my torso and the pale shade of my skin. You look like you've been through a war, Miss Hawkins. Just a long flight, ma'am, I said quietly. Professor Vance looked at me for a moment, then walked over to her desk and pulled out a file. Your original research proposal on nonlinear data modeling was one of the finest undergraduate submissions I've read in 5 years. When your withdrawal notice hit my desk from your previous university, I was surprised you chose us over Professor Wilson's lab. I kept my hands folded in front of me, my expression neutral. I believed this program offered a better environment for my focus. Professor Vance let out a dry chuckle. Well, Wilson's loss is our gain. But let Me be clear, my lab doesn't tolerate half measures. You have a full scholarship, but you will earn every cent of it. Can you start today? I can start right now, I said. She smiled, a brief, approving line. Good. Go see the lab manager on the second floor. Get your security badge. Welcome to the team, Sunny. As I walked down the carpeted hallway, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an email notification from my bank. My old account had been officially closed, and my new international account was active, credited with my initial research stipend. I looked out the window at the autumn trees turning crimson across the
Courtyard.
For the first time in my life, everything I had was built solely on my own merit.
No one could take it from me.
No one could hand it to Fiona. Meanwhile, 600 miles away, the atmosphere in Professor Wilson's office was decidedly less pleasant. Fiona sat on a leather sofa, wearing a designer tweed dress and expensive leather flats. Her hands were fidgeting with the strap of her high-end handbag. Professor Wilson, a strict man in his late 50s with thinning hair, sat behind his mahogany desk, holding the research proposal that Judith had submitted under Fiona's name. Fiona, Professor Wilson said, his voice measured and serious. I've been reviewing the theoretical framework you outlined in Section 3.
The
mathematical proof you used to solve the latency bottleneck. Could you walk me through the parameters you selected? Fiona's heart slammed against her ribs. She stared at the pages in her lap.
The
symbols on the paper looked like a foreign language. Fiona swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly bone dry. Well, I looked at the standard algorithmic structures and I wanted to optimize the efficiency. Professor Wilson frowned. Yes, but how did you derive the variables for equation 4? That requires a specific background in vector analysis. I used a specialized reference text. Fiona stammered, sweat breaking out along her hairline. I don't recall the exact title off the top of my head. Professor, it was a late night when I wrote it. Professor Wilson stared at her over his glasses. His eyes, sharp and experienced, narrowed slightly. He had met Fiona twice during her undergraduate years. Her academic record was mediocre at best, barely maintaining AB average, with faculty notes describing her as easily distracted and lacking deep analytical depth. When her mother had brought in this brilliant, cutting-edge proposal, Wilson had been skeptical, but Judith Hawkins had assured him that Fiona had worked privately on it for months. Now, looking at the terrified, blank expression on the girl's face, a cold suspicion began to form in his mind. I see, Professor Wilson said slowly, pulling the file back. Well, today is just an orientation, but we begin our core lab presentations on Friday. Every new research assistant is expected to present their proposal's methodology to the entire senior team. Fiona's face turned white. The entire team? Yes, Wilson said coldly, including the visiting scholars. Make sure you are thoroughly prepared to defend every word of this paper, Fiona. That will be
all.
Fiona practically ran out of the office. She stumbled out of the department building and burst into tears the moment she reached her car. She dialed Judith's phone immediately. Mom, Fiona sobbed into the receiver. You have to help me. Professor Wilson wants me to present the whole paper on Friday in front of everyone. I don't understand any of it. What? Judith's voice came over the speaker, filled with sudden anxiety.
What?
Do you mean you don't understand it? Didn't Sunny leave her research notes on her computer? The computer was ruined when the water spilled. Fiona cried. And she didn't write anything down on paper. Mom, you told her to rewrite it from memory.
Where is it?
Did she leave the new notes in her room? Judith stood in the middle of Sunny's empty bedroom, looking at the bare desk.
A
sudden cold knot tightened in her stomach. She didn't rewrite it, Judith whispered. What? Fiona screamed into the phone. She didn't write it? What am I supposed to do, Mom? If I go up there on Friday and fail, Professor Wilson will know I didn't write the proposal. I'll be kicked out of the lab. I'll be ruined. Calm down, Fiona. Stop crying. Judith shouted, her own voice trembling with rising panic. I'll find her. She must be staying with one of her college
friends.
I'll go to her university department right now and get her. Judith drove over the speed limit all the way to the campus where both her daughters had completed their undergraduate degrees. She marched up the stairs of the Academic Affairs building, her high heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. She didn't bother to knock before pushing open the door to the department chair's office. Dean Miller, Judith demanded, her face flushed with anger and stress. I need to know where Sunny is staying. She hasn't been home in 2 days and she isn't answering her phone. Dean Miller, a gray-haired woman who had known the Hawkins family for 4 years, looked up from her documents. She adjusted her glasses, looking at Judith with a cool, unreadable expression. Mrs. Hawkins, Dean Miller said calmly. Please sit down. I don't have time to sit down, Judith snapped, pacing across the room.
Her
Sister has an important lab presentation on Friday, and Sunny took materials that belong to the family. I need her location immediately. Dean Miller let out a long, slow breath. She closed the folder on her desk and leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Hawkins, I'm afraid I cannot give you any contact information for Sunny. Even if I wanted to, I don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? Judith sneered. She's enrolled in your graduate program. She's supposed to start orientation tomorrow. No, Dean Miller said quietly. She isn't. Judith froze. What? Dean Miller pulled a printed form from a red folder on her desk and turned it toward Judith. 3 days ago, Sunny Hawkins officially submitted a formal notice of complete withdrawal from our university. She canceled her graduate admission, relinquished her local scholarship, and requested her academic transcripts be sealed for international transfer. Judith stared at the document. Her eyes scanned the signature at the bottom. Sunny Hawkins, written in clean, decisive strokes. Withdrawal. Judith stammered, her voice suddenly losing all its volume. No, that's impossible. She worked for months to get into this program.
She
Wouldn't just leave. She didn't just leave, Mrs. Hawkins, Dean Miller said, her tone laced with severe disappointment. She was accepted into one of the top 10 research institutions in the world on a full international fellowship. She left the country yesterday. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, suffocating the room. Judith felt the floor shift beneath her feet. International? She went.
abroad?
With what money? I took her. Judith stopped herself mid-sentence, realizing what she was about to admit. Dean Miller's eyes narrowed into slits of icy contempt. You took her savings? Is that what you were going to say? I didn't. Judith lied stammeringly, her confidence completely shattering. I'm her mother. She can't just leave without telling me. Sunny is an adult, Mrs. Hawkins, Dean Miller said coldly, standing up from her desk to signal that the meeting was over. And frankly, after reviewing her academic history and seeing the incredible burden she carried while maintaining top honors, I am glad she finally found a place that recognizes her worth.
Good day.
Judith stood frozen in the middle of the office. Her phone rang in her hand. It was Fiona. Mom, did you find her? Did you get the notes? Fiona's panicked voice echoed through the speaker. Judith looked down at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. Fiona, Judith said, her voice hollow, stripped of all its authority.
She's
Gone. What do you mean, gone? She left the country, Judith whispered, staring blankly at the wall.
She
Withdrew from the university. She isn't coming back. Silence stretched across the phone line, followed by a sharp, terrified gasp. From Fiona. She left. Fiona shrieked. Then what about my presentation on Friday?
What?
About my spot in the lab? Mom, what am I going to do? Judith had no answer. For the first time in her life, the daughter who had always fixed everything, who had always absorbed every blow, who had always quietly obeyed, was gone. And there was no one left to sacrifice. Friday morning arrived with ruthless speed. The small auditorium in the university's research building was filled with 20 graduate students, 3 lab assistants, and Professor Wilson. Fiona sat in the front row, her hands icy cold, her face pale under a thick layer of foundation. She had spent the last 48 hours frantically trying to memorize terms from online summary articles, but without a foundational understanding of advanced data structures, the concepts were a jumble of meaningless jargon. Next, Professor Wilson's sharp voice echoed through the microphone. Fiona. Charlton. Fiona stood up, her knees trembling so badly she nearly tripped on the stair as she walked up to the podium. She plugged her flash drive into the projector. On the large screen behind her, the title of the research proposal appeared. Optimized dynamic vector distribution in high-latency networks. Good morning, Fiona began, her voice high and tight. Today I will present my paper. She clicked to the second slide. It was a diagram of an algorithmic framework, the exact framework Sunny had drawn during her 3 all-nighters. As you can see, Fiona stammered. The distribution model utilizes dynamic nodes to make the network faster. A senior research assistant in the third row raised his hand.
Fiona in.
Equation 3. You've used a non-standard transformation function. How did you resolve the loss of data precision during the secondary iteration? Fiona's mind went completely blank. Her chest tightened, and she felt like she couldn't breathe. The function was chosen because. She babbled, her eyes darting frantically around the room. Because it reduces the workload. That doesn't answer the question, the assistant frowned.
If you use that
function without a corrective coefficient, the whole dataset corrupts after the third pass. How did your preliminary test results bypass that? I ran the tests on my home computer. Fiona said desperately.
The
results were fine. Professor Wilson stood up from his chair. The room fell completely silent. Fiona, Wilson said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. Who wrote this proposal? Fiona turned ghost white. I did. I wrote it. Then explain to me why the author metadata on the original digital file submitted to my system lists the creator as Sonny Hawkins. Professor Wilson asked, holding up a printout from the university's IT log. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Students began whispering to one another, shooting disgusted looks at the podium. I can explain. Fiona sobbed, complete terror overtaking her. Sonny is my sister. She helped me format the document. That's all. Formatting a document does not embed her personal student ID tag into the source code of the algorithmic matrix, Professor Wilson said coldly. He closed his notebook with a loud thud. Leave the podium, Fiona. Step outside. The Academic Integrity Board will be contacting you before the end of the day. Fiona didn't wait. She grabbed her handbag, left her flash drive in the computer, and ran out of the auditorium crying hysterically, the mocking whispers of her peers echoing behind her. By mid-afternoon, Judith was sitting in the office of the Vice Dean of Academic Affairs. Fiona was sitting beside her, her eyes swollen red from hours of crying. This is a misunderstanding, Judith yelled at the committee of 3 senior
professors sitting across from them.
Sonny and Fiona worked on that proposal. Together, they're sisters. Families share work all the time. Mrs. Hawkins, the Vice Dean interrupted sternly. Academic research is not a family business. Submitting someone else's intellectual property under your own name is plagiarism. In a graduate program, it is grounds for immediate expulsion. You can't expel her, Judith screamed, her voice cracking. I paid her tuition. I donated to the alumni fund last year. You're ruining my daughter's future. Your daughter ruined her own future the moment she tried to steal her sister's work, the Vice Dean replied coldly. Furthermore, Professor Wilson's lab has formally filed a report for academic fraud. Fiona Charlton is officially expelled from this university, effective immediately.
No.
Mom, do something. Fiona wailed, grabbing Judith's arm. Fix it. You said you'd fix it. Judith looked at the stern, uncompromising faces of the professors. She looked at Fiona, who was weeping like a child, incapable of taking responsibility for a single thing. For the first time, a dark, terrifying reality crashed down on Judith. She had sacrificed Sonny's talent, Sonny's happiness, and Sonny's future to elevate Fiona. But without Sonny there to carry her, Fiona was nothing more than an empty, incompetent shell. 2 years passed. The autumn in Zurich was quiet and cold. Snow had already begun to dust the peaks of the distant Alps. Inside the glass-walled auditorium of the International Institute of Computer Science, 600 researchers, professors, and industry leaders sat in silence. On the main stage stood a young woman in a tailored dark blue suit. Her hair was pulled back into a neat, elegant twist. Her posture was straight, confident, and
tall.
And by applying this dynamic matrix, we have successfully reduced computational overhead by 42% while maintaining complete data integrity, I said, pointing my laser pointer at the primary display screen. The audience sat spellbound as I concluded my final slide. Thank you, I said simply, stepping back from the podium. For 2 seconds, the room was silent. Then Professor Vance stood up in the front row and began to clap. Within moments, the entire auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. Reporters from leading technology journals rushed toward the front of the stage, cameras flashing. Dr. Hawkins, a journalist called out. Your paper has just Been nominated for the International Pioneer Award. How does it feel to achieve this at such a young age? I looked at the flashing cameras, feeling a quiet, steady peace deep in my
chest.
It feels like the result of honest work, I replied calmly. Nothing more, nothing less. Over the past 2 years, I had worked tirelessly. I had undergone physical therapy for my back, recovered my health, completed my master's thesis in record time, and transitioned directly into a fully funded doctoral research position. I had made genuine friends, colleagues who respected my mind and supported my journey. I had never searched for news about Judith or Fiona. I had changed my email, my phone, and my online presence. As far as I was concerned, the past was a closed
book.
However, the past has a way of rearing its head when least expected. After the conference concluded, Professor Vance walked up to me in the lobby, carrying a thick folder. Wonderful presentation, Sonny, she said, giving my shoulder an affectionate
squeeze.
By the way, the conference administrative desk received several strange inquiries about you today. I raised an eyebrow. Inquiries? A woman claiming to be your mother has been calling the department office in Boston for months, Vance said, her expression turning cautious. They refused to give out your location, but after your name was published in the conference program, she apparently tracked down the venue list. She's downstairs in the main lobby right now, demanding to see you. I paused. The name Judith Hawkins felt like a word from an ancient, forgotten language. It brought no fear, no anger, not even a surge of adrenaline. Just a cold, distant recognition. I see, I said softly. Do you want me to have security escort her off the premises? Vance asked, watching my face carefully. I looked at the white snow falling outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. No, I said quietly. It's time to settle the ledger. The lower lobby of the conference center was vast and luxurious, filled with marble pillars and plush velvet seating. Sitting on a couch near the entrance was Judith Hawkins. 2 years had changed her drastically. The sleek, confident, middle-aged woman who used to command her household with an iron fist was gone. Her hair was heavily streaked with gray. Her expensive clothes looked worn and slightly outdated, and deep, bitter lines were etched around her mouth. Beside her sat Fiona. Fiona had gained weight, her eyes were dull, and she wore a cheap, flashy coat that looked completely out of place in the high-end venue. When the news of Fiona's academic fraud had spread 2 years ago, her reputation in academic circles had been completely destroyed. No other university would accept her. Without a degree or specialized skills, she had bounced from one low-paying retail job to another, quitting every time she felt disrespected. Judith had spent every cent of her remaining savings trying to fund Fiona's lifestyle and pay off debts incurred from Fiona's failed business ventures. 6 months ago, Judith had been forced to sell the family house and move into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the noisy side of town. When Judith caught sight of me walking down the grand staircase, her eyes widened in shock. I was wearing a sharp dark suit, my posture perfect, surrounded by international colleagues who nodded to me respectfully as I passed. I looked like someone who belonged to a world Judith could only dream of accessing. Sonny, Judith cried out, pushing herself off the couch and rushing toward me. Security guards stepped forward immediately, but I held up a hand, stopping them. Sonny, oh my God, Sonny, Judith sobbed, reaching out her hands to touch my arms. I took one step backward, smoothly evading her touch. Her hands hovered awkwardly in the air before dropping to her sides. Sonny, look at you, Judith stammered, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. You've grown up so much. You're so successful. We've been looking for you for 2 years. Do you have any idea how much your mother suffered? Suffered. I repeated, my voice even, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion. I doubt that, Judith. Judith flinched at the use of her first name. Fiona walked up behind her, looking at my designer suit and the prestigious conference badge pinned to my lapel with a mixture of jealousy and resentment. Sonny, how could you be so heartless? Fiona whirled, trying to adopt her old, accusatory tone, though her voice lacked its old conviction. You left us. Without a word. You withdrew from school, you ran away abroad, and you left Mom to deal with everything. Because of you, my reputation was ruined. I lost my spot in Professor Wilson's lab. I looked at Fiona. I didn't see a formidable rival or a favored sister anymore. I just saw a weak, pathetic parasite who still believed the world owed her a living. You lost your spot because you couldn't answer a single technical question about a paper you didn't write, I said quietly. You ruined yourself, Fiona.
I.
Simply stopped holding you up. Fiona's face flushed red with humiliation, but she had no words to fight back. Judith grabbed Fiona's arm, pulling her back, before turning to me with a pleading, desperate look. Sonny, please don't be like this, Judith begged, her voice cracking.
I.
No, I made mistakes. I know I was hard on you, but I'm your mother. Everything I did, I thought was for the good of the family. We're broke, Sonny. Judith wept openly now, dropping all remaining pretense of.
Pride.
The house is gone. Fiona can't find a proper job. My health is failing, and we have thousands of dollars in medical bills and rent debts. You're making so much money now, you're famous. You have to help your sister and me.
Where?
Your family. I listened to her speech quietly. Family. She only remembered the word family when she needed a sacrifice.
When?
She needed someone to feed off of. Wait here, I said. I turned and walked back toward the administrative desk. Judith and Fiona exchanged a triumphant, relieved look, believing that the old, obedient Sonny was finally returning to her place. 2 minutes later, I walked back over. I was holding a small, white envelope. I stepped in front of Judith and handed her the envelope. Judith's fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a cashier's check made out to Judith Hawkins. The amount was exactly $18,250. What is this? Judith asked, staring at the numbers. That is the exact balance of the itemized ledger I left on the dining table 2 years ago, I said, my voice as clear and cold as winter ice. It includes every dollar you spent on my high school tuition, my meals, and my living expenses. From age 16 to 18, calculated with an annual inflation rate of 5%, minus the education fund you stole from me. Judith stared at the check, her breath catching in her throat. I promised I would repay every cent with interest. I continued smoothly. Now, the debt is settled in full. Legally, financially, and morally, we are complete strangers. Sonny, no. Judith cried, trying to grab my hand as tears poured down her face. I don't want your money. I want my daughter back. You can't just pay me off and cut me out of your life. You never had a second daughter, Judith, I said softly, looking her dead in the eye. You had a golden child and you had a tool. And the tool broke. I turned on my heel and began walking toward the exit doors where Professor Vance and the conference security team were waiting. Sonny, come back. Judith screamed behind me, her voice echoing off the high marble ceilings of the lobby. I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. Sonny. Fiona tried to run after me, but 2 uniformed security guards immediately stepped into her path, blocking her way. Ma'am, please step back, the guard said firmly. You are causing a disturbance. You need to leave the premises immediately. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back even once. Outside, the snow was falling softly over the Grand Plaza. I stepped down the stone stairs, pulling my coat tighter around my shoulders. The cold air rushed into my lungs, pure, sharp, and exhilaratingly free. Professor Vance stepped out beside me, handing me a warm cup of coffee. She looked back at the glass doors of the lobby, where security was currently escorting 2 weeping, distraught women out into the side street. Are you okay, Sonny? Vance asked softly. I looked up at the gray sky, watching the snowflakes dance in the air before landing gently on my skin. There was no lingering bitterness in my heart. No residual anger. The dark, suffocating room where I had once stayed up for 3 nights writing a proposal for a mother who didn't care had finally vanished into the distance. I took a sip of the warm coffee and looked back at Professor Vance, a genuine, radiant smile touching my lips. I've never been better, I said. Together, we walked down the snow-covered street toward the bright lights of the city, leaving the shadows of the past far behind in the white, quiet snow.